Okay, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you're watching. Welcome to another episode of Coaching for Coaches, the show that is designed primarily to give you some really common sense, but not necessarily common practice ways that you can grow your coaching business. If you're here, if you're watching live, give me a yo in the chat. I've got the comments to my right. If you have a question, feel free to post your question in the comments. So we're just going to get straight into today's show. What I'm about to share with you, I believe, are four really fundamental, really glaringly obvious mistakes, actually, that a lot of coaches make in the beginning. Some coaches make this when they've been doing it for years. I know I've been guilty of making these mistakes. I've been guilty of making these mistakes, correcting these mistakes, and then making these mistakes again. So, the saying is, knowledge is power, but in actual fact, knowledge is only power if it's applied. And so what I'm going to share with you today, my intention is that even if you've heard it before, you'll maybe ask yourself the question, do I intellectually know this? And am I actually applying it? Because that's really the key part. Everybody knows what to do to get fit, get in shape, but not everyone is in shape. So it's really important that you know the difference between common sense and common practice. So 4 things that I'm going to share with you today, 4 mistakes that when I was reflecting on this overnight, I was thinking, what are 4, because I've shared mistakes before, not having your own coach, that kind of stuff. I was like, what are 4 things that I could share that are a bit more underground, maybe really so basic that actually it can be a blind spot for a lot of people. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I'm just going to bring up my slides because I've got kind of 4 images to help narrate today's show. So let me just bring that up for you. So the first mistake that I see a lot of beginners make, is what I call having an outdated peer group. So what do I mean by outdated peer group? Well, there's a great story, or I saw a documentary a few years ago of Usain Bolt. And in the documentary, Usain Bolt was, sat reflecting on his career. Obviously, he's won Olympic gold medal after Olympic gold medal after Olympic gold medal, broke world records, 100 meters, 200 meters, relay, all this kind of stuff, right? Greatest, I think, Olympian in Jamaican history anyway. And the interviewer said to Usain, tell me, Usain, what's a secret to your success that is one that is never really talked about? Like, what's something that, aside from the diet and the nutrition and the training hard and the sleeping well and the being consistent, all that stuff, being genetically blessed, what's something that maybe you don't always share that would be really valuable for people to hear? And he goes on to say, he said, when I was about 15 years old, I got the opportunity to go down to the Olympic Stadium in Jamaica. And I got to race with the then men's Olympic team. And that day that I got to race against them, I, ran as fast as I could, got to the finish line, and I'd obviously been beaten by all of them. And he said, and I was deflated. I went back to the van after I'd run. My coach kind of looked at me and said, that's why you got to stop running against boys, and instead you got to start running against men. And the rest is history. I've told you may have heard me tell this story before, but I think it's a really relevant story. If you spend time with 5 Olympic runners who can run 100 meters really fast, you might not be genetically blessed enough to get to Olympic standard, but I guarantee you'll get faster. If you spend time with 5 really successful entrepreneurs, you will probably become a successful entrepreneur too. If you spend time with 5 drug lords in New York, you'll probably become one too. If you spend time with 5 incredible Silicon Valley entrepreneurs at Google, you'll probably become one too. If you spend time with 5 people that are complainers, negative, whining, then you'll become the 6th, you'll become one too. So who you spend time with is really, really crucial. I think there's a saying which is, you are the direct reflection of the expectations of your peer group. Who you spend time with really is who you become. That's Tony Robbins. So you got to ask yourself the question, like, am I spending time with like-minded coaches? Are you spending time with entrepreneurs who are ahead of you in business? Because if you're not, it will be very difficult for you to achieve something that you haven't achieved, because you haven't actually been around and exposed to someone who's frankly pretty normal, but has achieved a level of success that you haven't up until now. One of my earliest experiences of this was spending time with a good friend of mine, Dan Bradbury, who is the same age as me. And when we first met 10, 11 years ago, he was already making 6, 7 figures as a coach. And I was just starting out. And I remember thinking, like, well, if he can do it, then why can't I? Because he was, said with due respect to Dan, he won't mind me saying this, but he wasn't like Tony Robbins, he wasn't 7 foot tall, wasn't like some big American guru with loads of books and things like that. So I was like, well, I'd never heard of him, right? So if he can do it, then maybe I can as well. So who you spend time with is who you become. It's the reason why I'm in a mastermind group. In our system, we have a mastermind for coaches to help you to get to that first 50k and beyond. Who you spend time with is really, really crucial, because who you spend time with is who you become. Second mistake that I see a lot of beginner coaches make, which is something again that I did as well, is having failure to have a mentor. Failure to have a mentor, I would say, is like trying to teach yourself how to drive. It's not legal, but more importantly, it's impossible. It's near on impossible. I went for years without a mentor, and I tell you the reason why, because I got some really got some advice from my mum growing up, because my dad left my mum when I was very young, and the advice was, don't rely on other people, because your dad left. People will generally let you down. So I got this pearl of wisdom from my mum that then became ingrained as a belief, so much so that any time an opportunity presented itself where a mentor wanted to help me, free or paid, I immediately went into scam, resistance, bullshit filter, just trying to take my money, all this kind of stuff, right? Instead of filtering that through my own intuitive nature and my gut intuition, instead I just went, it's got to be bullshit, because my mum said everyone's untrustworthy. Now, there are people out there that are untrustworthy, but listening to other people's advice sometimes you can do it too much. If you don't listen to your own voice, then that lack of having a center and trusting your own gut intuition can see you slow your progress down massively. I joined a mastermind group a couple of years ago, and my growth has been exponential in every area of my life, like not just business, in every area. Had I held on to that old belief, then I would have, I don't know where I'd be now. Really, really crucial. The next mistake, third mistake of 4 that I see a lot of beginner coaches make, see a lot of experienced coaches make this. I sometimes still fall into this trap. I think it's one of the downsides. There's not many downsides to social media. I think it's, if we look for the good, it is a beautiful resource. Like the fact that I can Zoom call my mum, who's 2 hours away, so that she can see her beautiful granddaughter Sage developing. For me, that would not be possible without the internet and everything that's in the ecosystem of that. But for me, one of the downsides of the internet and social media is it makes it easier to see what everyone else is doing. And so the third mistake that I see a lot of coaches make is this thing that I call external comparison. Michael Jordan, when interviewed, if you haven't seen The Last Dance Netflix documentary, incredible documentary, was asked, kind of similar to the Usain Bolt thing that I shared with you, but a different way of looking at that, different way of looking at peer group. Michael Jordan was asked, why do you think you've become the best in the league? And he said, well, I'm only competing with myself, whereas everyone else in the league is trying to compete with me. He said, I'm only interested in how did Michael Jordan, do against the Detroit Pistons, one of the teams in the NBA. How did I do against them last year? And all I know I have to do is beat how I did this year. Sorry. Michael Jordan's saying, all I've got to do against the Detroit Pistons this year is beat how I did against them last year. And what most people are doing, especially coaches, is they're comparing themselves to Tony Robbins and Brendan Burchard. And worse still is, and I've been guilty of this, is comparing to people that are similar to you. Like you meet someone at a seminar, you're at the same level, then you see them online and all of a sudden they've got a yacht, a Lamborghini, or a coaching business that's making millions. And you're like, shit, we were at the same training. That's the comparison that can most hurt you. So comparing yourself to other people externally will just see you just go into imposter syndrome and self-doubt. It's a really important thing that you've got to cut out. Instead, what you've got to do is spend more time reflecting, more time looking at how far you've come from this time last year. A regular question I'm asking myself is, am I beating Miles Grant of 2020? And the answer right now is a resounding yes. In every area of my life, I feel that I'm doing far better. The dial has moved up significantly on every area of my life compared to this time last year. Everything else is irrelevant. Doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. It doesn't matter if their progress on last year is bigger. What matters to me is, am I whooping Miles Grant of 2020? And if the answer is yes, I'm winning. That's what you've got to focus on. And the last thing, which really ties in beautifully with this external comparison piece, but this is a really, really critical one. And actually, I would say that this probably holds you back, holds most beginner coaches especially back more than anything else. And this is the one that you've really got to pay attention to. And it's this thing that we call perfection paralysis. What do I mean by perfection paralysis? Well, I learnt this a few years ago from a really good friend and mentor of mine, Lucy Johnson. Hey, Lucy, if you're watching, who in a seminar room asked the question, who in the room considers themselves a bit of a perfectionist? Hands raised. She said, here's another way of looking at perfection. She said, raise your hand again if you feel that you're your biggest critic. Hands go up, right? No one can criticize you more than you probably internally criticize yourself. She said, so here's where people have got perfection wrong. She said, if you're your biggest critic, if a piece of work that you produce or a piece of content that you produce or a coaching session that you deliver or a live video that you produce is in your head 5 out of 10, what is it going to be if you're your biggest critic to the people that see it? And she asked that to the audience. And if the audience are honest, if they're 5 out of 10, everybody else is going to consider it at least a 6, maybe a 7, maybe an 8, maybe a 9, maybe even a 10. Because if you're your biggest critic, whatever number you give yourself, everyone is probably going to make it, probably going to think that it's better than you think it is. So perfection paralysis is waiting to produce something until you think it's perfect. When in actual fact, perfection doesn't exist. It's a non-standard. Perfection is a standard, Tony Robbins says, is a standard below 0 because it's holding back on your unique gifts and your ideas instead of putting it out there in a way that could help people because you're worried that the world won't validate you for that idea. It's holding something back. I'm not ready to put that out yet. Let me put it another way. If a paramedic had to wait until their ability to do CPR on a person was perfect and there was a person lying by the side of the road having a heart attack, and they were the only one around, perfection would be them walking on by. Oh, no. I know I've done CPR. Yeah, I know, but I've not quite got it perfect yet. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave that person to die by the side of the road. That's what perfection paralysis is. And when you put it that way, hopefully you hear that and think, shit, that's stupid. Not delivering your coaching sessions because you don't think they're perfect. So instead, the people that could experience your coaching go on suffering. Not doing a live video because you're worried that the lighting isn't perfect, when the message could be exactly what someone needs at that moment. And because you wait a week, they miss the message. And maybe they can commit suicide. I don't know. I'm being extreme to try and make you see that actually holding on to things, not just putting things out. There's a great saying I love: prolific beats perfect. Write that down. Prolific beats perfect. There's another Michael Jordan quote which says, forgive me, the numbers aren't going to be right, but he's like, I've missed the match winning shot 50 times. Like, I've missed the game winning shot 50 times. I've missed 5,000 points. And that's the reason why I've become the best in the world, because I've missed so much. Failure is the fastest way to succeed. A lot of people get that wrong, but failure is the fastest way to succeed. You've got to fail more. This broadcast is imperfect, but hopefully it's helping you in some way. The lighting might not be right, the sound might not be great, the slides might not be shown properly, but I'm out there putting a shot out. And that's what you've got to do more often. So I hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast. If you have, and you have questions, comments that you want to ask, feel free to comment in the chat below. We have our next life coaching certification at the time of doing this video, this Saturday, the 21st of August. There are still some seats left available for that. If you're watching this broadcast after that date, drop us a message and we can tell you about a future date. That's it. Miles, over and out. See you next time. Peace out.